First of all, here's a disclaimer. Anything and everything that I have could be potentially wrong in the sense that it may not work for you. So I'm never going to tell you, hey, you should do this or you should do that. What I can say is you could do this and you could do that. Because if I told you how to live your life, you're going to do what you want. So there's really no point in telling you that. So let's dive in, shall we? So here are some guidelines for people that may be interested in having haunted vessels. Perhaps you already have them, whether you inherited it or you found it or you bought it at an estate sale or eBay or Mercari or Etsy, or Poshmark. And perhaps you don't know about haunted vessels, but I can tell you that haunted vessels, ever since the Annabelle movies, have been quite demonized and quite put in a negative light, similar to Ouija boards and tarot cards, when in actuality, if you separate yourself from movies and Hollywood and that kind of thing, you'll find that a majority of people who have haunted vessels are actually having very positive experiences. But you have to know where to look and you have to separate yourself from the rat race. Otherwise, these threads and Reddit and YouTube comments, and Facebook, as well as X, which used to be Twitter, who cares? And many other social media, because they often will, and this is quite common, is sometimes when negative things are put out there, it kind of consumes all of the positivity and pushes it to the side. But if you go to the side where all this positive stuff is, you will eventually find that many haunted vessels that you come across have been chosen to. Otherwise, the spirits have decided that they want to inhabit that particular object. And the reason spirits attach themselves, they will attach themselves, but attachment isn't the same as bonding. Bonding means somebody trapped it there by some complex ritual. Let's think of Chucky or any one of those movies where there's a pentagram on the floor. That is not a realistic portrayal of what magic is, but let's go with that. I mean, that's a good visual for you. It's complicated. Right now, I'm visualizing Jennifer Tilly on the floor with that magic book and a pentagram. So um, that's my visual. Of course, I'm always visualizing Jennifer Tilly. But never mind that. um, anyway, and another thing is every spirit is very unique. And to measure what you see with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and measuring it to the vessels that you have in your possession, it may not go very well. So, one thing that I recommend not to do is if you ever have a haunted vessel and it gets a little too much for you, please, I recommend not to burn it. Burning is an extreme measure unless you're burning incense or burning candles. That's not recommended. Uh, it's not recommended in the house. It's not recommended outside the house. And this is why. Burning doesn't solve anything. It never has. In all of history, um, and let's get away from the Salem witch trials because nobody was burned on the stake. There was only one person that was burned in Salem that has been recorded. The rest were hanged. But how about the Spanish Inquisition? That didn't solve anything. That just created more chaos and havoc and violence. And um, many millions of people were murdered within this time. So, and then in the process, the people that were causing all of those things, the Knights Templar, who they were eventually murdered as well, and met the same fate as those that were burned. So, did it solve anything? No, everybody died. And also another thing, when you burn something, you're just letting the spirit out. So if that is a particularly unreasonable spirit, you done fucked up a lot, big time. And you just freed them. And if they were if there was a reason that they were bound there, well, throw care out the window. And you've just released a unreasonable and probably dangerous spirit into the world. Another thing is when you burn something that is the most that is the worst kind of disrespect you can give a entity, because this is an entity that lives on another, plane of existence. It lives in another dimension, um, another realm, and it's really beyond our comprehension. And some of these spirits have never been human. They've never been alive per se, as in our definition with flesh and blood and all that. So, they don't have the same logic system, but they do get angry. Oh, yes. Spirits are very emotional. So, um, when you insult them, you insult them intensely, because they are so emotional. Emotional in the sense that their emotions are another level that we can't even comprehend. And logically, that's because I came to the conclusion, just because they live in a dimension that we can't even comprehend. So when you insult them, you really do insult them. Like with us, we have flesh and blood and we have feelings and that kind of thing, but there's a lot to go through. But this does not have a body, okay? That's why it's in a vessel. It's energy. So energy is really freaking emotional, okay? So when you do that, when you burn a vessel, what's going to happen? They're going to be angry at you. You insulted them. You did what you did was the equivalent of someone coming into your home and setting it on fire. They set your house on fire. That would you be angry? Yeah, you would be freaking angry. You would be taking them to court and making sure that they're behind bars. And they will seek vengeance, and if they may see this burning as oh yeah, you might have established dominance. Oh yeah. But here's the kicker here. The real kicker is that you might have established dominance, but guess what? You only protected yourself, which means when you burn the vessel, they're going to say, oh, well, I'm not going to mess with you, but guess what? I'm going to mess with your family. I'm going to go to your aunts, your uncles, your cousins. I'm going to go to anybody that I can. I'm going to mess with your pets. I'm going to deal with your friends. And that's the way that's not with all spirits. It's not with all demons. But if you've pissed them off and you've disrespected them, you're going to get disrespect back. And they are very, when it comes to equal exchange, yeah, they don't appreciate you disrespecting them. Can you imagine if you were somebody that had been alive since the beginning of time and somebody disrespected you? You would be like, it's kind of like, that grandmother that's always saying, I've lived this long and how dare you disrespect me? It's that kind of thing. If you've lived through everything and then some whippersnapper that looks like a freaking child, baby to them, and they're coming to them and saying, I rebuke you, they're just gonna laugh at you, give you the middle finger, and then be incredibly insulted, and then wreak havoc on anybody and everybody that you know. And that is something that you'd like to avoid. I'd like to avoid. Maybe you'd like to avoid it too. And one solution is not to get haunted vessels in the first place. That's also a really good idea as well. If you are not spiritually inclined and you get, you're very anxiety ridden and maybe you don't do well with spiritual stimuli, that's perfectly fine. Another thing is isolation. Isolation is not effective and is not necessary unless a spirit is truly evil, meaning it has evil intent. It gets its direct line to Lucifer and is purposefully on an errand to destroy you or someone else, then yeah, that would be necessary. You would probably isolate it somewhere. But the thing is, with the burning and the isolation, it doesn't make it go away. No, no, no. The burning doesn't destroy it. The isolation doesn't destroy it either. It just makes it angrier. Yeah. Um, but in some cases that is necessary because some spirits don't work well with others. You know, some don't. And these are very specific cases, but when it comes to having a reasonable spirit, which most of them are, um, you don't want to isolate that spirit because you don't know their agenda. You don't know who they get their orders from, whether they get orders from anybody, whether they're there to just watch, because there's specific demons out there that will never harm you. They either don't have the capability or they just don't want to because they're there to watch. And there are particular demons that they're like scouts. They'll just come in and watch and then go to back to headquarters, wherever that is. Maybe they're getting it from another demon. I don't know. Um, but they may go over there and say, yep, this happened and this happened and this happened. And that's all they do. They just sit and watch. Okay, that's a little bit creepy, but it's true. But isolation is dangerous, and this is why. If you have a reasonable spirit and you are putting them away, that's the equivalent of putting an adult in timeout. It doesn't make sense. Unless they're like developmentally disabled or, you know, they are mentally 4 years old, that doesn't work. It doesn't. It doesn't matter how many buttons you push at this point. But another thing is isolation is kind of is going to feel like abandonment to them. It's going to feel very heartbreaking for them, and it especially if you're just like throwing them in a closet, throwing them in the garage or the attic, and just treating them as garbage, as if they don't exist. And especially if it's a toy that a child has played with. Think of the purity and the love and the adoration and just the overall energy of someone, of a, you know, of a child. The trust and it's such a beautiful thing when a child has a toy that they carry around and all the adults go, oh, that's so sweet. And eventually that child grows up and they're left all alone in the dark. Nobody engages with them, nobody talks to them, and sometimes the people that they go to don't know how to handle haunted objects. And so in this isolation, I understand isolation very well. I understand being lonely. I understand neglect and abandonment. And I can tell you that frustration will just fester and simmer until it is angry. And then when you try to touch them or interact with them, it will come out as anger. And that doesn't necessarily mean that this is a malevolent spirit. It's just frustrated. It wants to be seen and heard and engaged with. It wants to have a connection, an emotional connection with you. And maybe you're just not the right person for that. And that is okay. So if you ever have a vessel that you can't handle, give it to someone you trust. Give it to someone. Don't put it in the garbage or do that kind of thing. Give it to someone that you actually know that's spiritually inclined, a witch, a voodoo priestess, your local witch doctor, or somebody that is used to spiritual stimuli. Otherwise, you know, being overwhelmed by energy. And spirits are energy, so when they come to you, they're going to communicate through energy. And sometimes that energy could be very negative, but it's not necessarily meaning that it is a negative spirit. And in order to do that, you just maybe get somebody that communicate with them. Try a spirit board or a Ouija board or that kind of thing. Maybe try some paranormal equipment, some paranormal apps or anything like that. my paranormal apps that I use are amazing, and they work really well. And totally worth the money, I'm just saying. And I emotionally empathize and sympathize with a spirit that is left alone and abandoned, because I suppose that is something that I've experienced. And it just breaks my heart that these objects, these beautiful toys that gave so much joy to someone are just being left alone. And I actually had a seller that specifically said, "I hate her. She's a little dirty. And I'm not bothering to clean her. And please, if you want to, please do. But please don't give it to a child." I'm like, wow, dude. I think you need to chill. It actually said that in big bold letters too. And I wasn't really paraphrasing either. So, and that was a doll. And I'm gonna say, if you're gonna hate something, it could very well, they're gonna hate you back. Another thing is, don't be surprised when a spirit tells you one thing and then another thing happens, because sometimes they will tell you your truth, otherwise your truth and what you believe. They're not going to tell you something that you don't believe or that you can't handle or necessarily comprehend, if they are indeed like looking out for you. But also, they're only going to give information that they're comfortable with. If they are not appointed to guard you or guide you or protect you, they don't have to tell you shit. Okay? They don't. Spirits don't have to do anything for you. You can buy them anywhere from an estate sale to Mercari to Poshmark to eBay to Etsy. That does not mean that you own them. They don't belong to you. You can give them as many offerings as you would like, and you can say as many nice things to them. That does not mean that they're going to like you. They have preferences. They do not perform. They are not going to perform for you. Just because you set up your equipment and put it in their face is equivalent to you going up to someone and putting a microphone in their face and say, "Okay, inquiring minds would like to know." Put that in your face. And that's going to be seen as aggressive. So the best thing when you have a haunted object, it is okay to be anxious. It is okay to be scared. It is okay to be nervous. I've been nervous myself many, many times. I have been tongue-tied when I've gotten something and just fumbled over the words. And I'm not somebody that has a hard time talking. I talk non-stop, okay? That's why I have no problem making these videos, okay? It's okay? And so, but what's dangerous, really, is when you're with a entity that is made out of energy. It's important to check your own energy and your own attitude. How are you approaching them? Because if you're coming in and they do something and you're like, "Ah!" and you're reacting is different to responding, obviously, right? Responding means when responding could mean when you say something, I'm going to say something else. And reacting, on the other hand, has nothing to do with responding. You're not responding. Responding means when somebody says, "Okay, did you hear me?" and you say, "Yes," that's responding. Reacting, on the other hand, is when somebody asks you, "How are you doing?" and you go, "Ah!" That's reacting. And let me tell you what that does. When you come to a haunted object and you're like this, and you come towards them, and they do something creepy or move, and you're like, "Ah!" that is the equivalent of you going "Blah!" like that. That is your energy. That is your energy. Your face may be doing, maybe just going like this, but your energy, on the other hand, is a frickin' screaming woman that is putting their hands all over their head and flailing them like they just saw a frickin' bee. And I have done this actually. You can do this with just about any sort of animal. Animals and bees and certain things can kind of detect certain energy levels. I really do believe this because I used to flip out when I saw bees, okay? I used to flip out. I used to be very scared of them. But then there got to be a certain point where I stopped. I stopped and I would breathe, and you know what? I have had actual bees crawling on me, and they will just take off. I'll just go, and it's all about energy. It's essentially about energy. And animals are very receptive when it comes to energy. And so, really, you need to check yourself. You know what I mean? Check yourself before you wreck yourself, Connie, because if you come into a room, I'm not saying that you can't be anxious, but if you are anxious, sometimes they will reflect what you are feeling. So if you're feeling apprehensive, they may um, be apprehensive as well. If you're feeling happy, they might feel happy too. It's very much like having a pet, you know. It's very much like having an animal around the house. It's very in tune with your energy. At times, that creature will try to please you, and other times they don't give a shit. Which really is just the contrast between cats and dogs. Yeah. Dogs will do anything for you. Cats will just be like, "Oh, you're here. Okay. Go away." And dogs are just like, "You left. It felt like 5 hours. It was really only 5 minutes. I love you. Let me flick your face off." Yeah, that's a dog. But either way, I like them both. I don't think I've ever had an experience where an animal didn't like me. Um, I love animals, and so it's essentially about energy. Sometimes people don't have the right energy. There can be a haunted vessel that will be very, very active and will be angry, throwing things off the shelf, and potentially wreaking havoc within their environment. And then they go to the right home and they're calm, and that is all about energy. It's not necessarily a negative thing. Some people just naturally have anxious energy. Some people just have the energy that just isn't well suited for them. Um, I can tell you though that the haunted vessels that I have and the spirits that are around me are very calm around me. There is something about my energy that's very calming. It's very grounding for them. They'll try to do things that will kind of freak me out a little bit, and I will be like, "Oh, that was neat. Yeah. Um, but why the worms?" That'll be because I'm not really scared of worms. Yeah, I'm not. Could we go with something else? And so the best thing is just to be sincere and very honest. And I know people will tell you in the negative tone, "Well, it's a demon. Why should you be honest? They're just gonna lie to you." From my experience, this isn't from your experience. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'd love to hear about your experience. Please do. But from my experience, if it's a demon, they're really, really forthright. They're very upfront. If I'm setting up, my equipment and that kind of thing with paranormal investigating, the first thing that they'll do is just say, "Demon." I'll look at my phone and it'll have a word bank, and the first I can tell you on several occasions that they will just come up and say it. They'll say demon. And when it comes to my Ouija or the Ouija board, they will immediately tell you when you ask them. Now, if a spirit happens to say something that's contrary to what's going on, it's either because they don't know, or they just don't feel comfortable telling you, or the fact that they I've actually had angelic beings come to me and say, I'll be like, why didn't you tell me this? And they'll say, well, this wasn't your truth. It wasn't true to you. And we didn't think that you were ready for that. We were warning you. We were trying to tell you that you're not ready for that. And now you're ready for us to tell you the truth. And I'm like, that's lying, isn't it? But in their point of view, I have to remember they aren't like us. They don't have flesh and blood. They don't their ways are not our ways. So in their viewpoint, they're either protecting you, protecting them, or protecting themselves or somebody else. And they can be very protective. And yes, demons can protect you. They can. But that is a preference. Not everybody feels comfortable with that. I understand. And but other than that, these are pretty good things to consider if you are in, you're in a situation where you have a haunted object. And but the main thing is being respectful. Respect is key when you have a haunted vessel. Don't be throwing them around. It's okay if you drop them, as long as they're not porcelain. That would be scary. And just as long as you say that it was an accident, because quite possibly, normally, if I drop one of my haunted vessels, and they know, because they know my intent, they feel my intent, so they know that I wasn't purposefully trying to be disrespectful. And but it's good to be very forthright and very honest with them. Be sincere. Tell them how you're feeling. Like, for instance, if something is making you uncomfortable and they're doing that, um vocalize that. Don't just expect them to know. They are telepathic, but they don't necessarily know how to read your mind. Your mind is very sacred, and they that is a sacred space. That is your mind is a sacred space. They're not going to invade. Um, First of all, why would you want to invade my brain? My brain is weird and ADHD, and that's one of the reasons there's not a lot of spirits don't possess objects, because let's just face it, we're drama. We're not really good vessels. We are unpredictable. We are go from one extreme to the next. Some of us are ADHD. And where is the music coming from? Yeah, no, too many tabs open. Yeah, and from what I've heard from actual spirits that have had experience with possession, it's not enjoyable for them. So, just be understanding and patient, and be aware of your energy, but also be aware of their energy, because they have feelings too. They exist. They have the right to take up space. But you also have the right to choose who gets to take that space up with you. And when you bring them in the home, put them in the central part of the living room. Put them somewhere where where people can see them. Introduce your haunted vessels to the family, to the pets. See how they react. Because if your pets are reacting really really well with them, then that's a good spirit to have around. And if your family is having a positive experience with it too, and your friends, then that's good too. But just make it very apparent to them that your family is their family, your friends are their friends, and that your home is their home. You aren't just bringing a spirit or a toy or an object or an antique into your home. You're bringing a sentient being. You're bringing a friend. You're bringing a protector. You're bringing someone that could potentially enrich your life. And if it's not the right fit for you, that's okay. But don't react and start freaking out and doing all of these things where, you know, it's not good for your mental health to be so reactionary, because I used to be there. I used to be a very reactionary person. I mean, really, you're like, really, I couldn't tell. But yeah, I used to be the anxiety-ridden, conservative Christian that thought everything was satanic and all of that. But you know what? I became stronger. I became um, more level-headed, and I'm not perfect. I don't have all my shit together. I have some of it together. I fall apart all the time, and I have to sew myself back up like Sally from Nightmare Before Christmas. I have to, put my arm back on. Most of the time my head rolls away, so that's a problem. But other than that, I hope that this was all helpful for you, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a beautiful, blessed day.